Hello and welcome. In this video, we're going to take a look and see how we're able to manage our OSGi bundles using the Gogo shell. And in turn, since these are OSGi bundles, these will also be Liferay modules. We can apply the same principles to one another since they're technically the same thing. So there are a lot of OSGi bundle management tasks that you can see here on the screen. A lot of different things that we want to be able to do. It's just a matter of, well, how do we do these things? Things like check the status of our bundles. We know that the state of the bundles are very important in knowing whether or not a bundle is working as we intended. What is the current state of the bundle's life cycle, and so on and so forth. A lot of different things, a lot of different tasks. So let's go ahead and see how some of these things can be accomplished. Before we do though, let's talk some of the features and functionalities of the Gogo shell. So the Gogo shell is based on, well, a shell, so a tiny shell language. So this supports a lot of the common things that you would expect in a shell, like a Linux command line or terminal, for example. So you can do things like piping, closures, variable settings, and so on. Now let's go ahead and talk some of the different commands. Now all of these commands are provided in documentation, but we'll just highlight a couple of different ones. First things first, each command within the Gogo shell is delineated based upon a namespace. So the namespace that we see here kind of gives you an idea of what the command is going to be used. So there will be a colon that separates the left-hand side and the right-hand side. The left-hand side, as we see here, is the namespace, again, giving us some sort of context as to where is this command coming from. How do we even work with the Gogo shell? So you can use the Gogo shell straight from Liferay Developer Studio. You just right-click the server and then select Gogo shell. If you're using a terminal or a telnet client, you're first going to need to set a configuration within your portal ext.properties specifying what is the connection port that you will be using in order to connect to the Gogo shell. Otherwise, by default, you will not be able to telnet into it. Let's talk about some of the commands. So again, each command is delineated by a namespace on the left-hand side of that colon that we saw previously. Now, on the right-hand side will be the actual command itself. Now, in practicality, you can just type in the command, but if the command is listed in multiple namespaces, that's when the namespace is needed. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Some of the common commands that you'll be using, you can use the help command to figure out what commands are available. If you have a question about a specific command, you can type help followed by that command. The most common command that we're going to be using is that lb command listing all of the bundles. And if you want to exit or disconnect from the Gogo shell, you will use disconnect. If you type exit, it shuts down the container, thus shutting down Liferay, so your servlet container. There are a couple of other commands that are going to help us out when we're going through our debugging. The letter B gives us information about the bundle. This is kind of the synopsis of the bundle itself. Diag, D-I-A-G, gives us the issues that exist within the OSGi container. If you do diag followed by a specific bundle ID, this will give you the diagnosis of a specific bundle. Otherwise, if you just type in the command, it'll show you all of the issues. One of my personal favorites, DMWTF, it lets you know what dependencies are missing. So dependency management, where's the failure? That one's just kind of fun. But the most common ones we use in the debugging world is going to be the letter B followed by diag. Headers is also very, very useful as well. Let's take a look at a couple of different examples. So here in this screenshot, we see that you can use piping, you can use grep to search or grep for a specific string, in this case, blogs. So lb lists some bundles and then a specific string to grep for blogs. Another example here, right? lb-l, pipe into grep, looking for that specific string, gives us a little bit more detail, as well as the package path of where that specific jar or that specific OSGi bundle exists. Inspect is also kind of a nifty one as well. This allows us to inspect or take a look at the service that exists or the services that exists within a specific bundle. This example here shows just that. So SCR info. So SCR, again, is the namespace. On the right hand of the colon is the specific command itself. So giving us some information about a component. So this gives much more detailed look at our services, which can be expressed in Liferay as components. Right, there are a number of other commands that are provided for you as well. You can follow this link here to get some additional documentation. So those are the basics of the Gogo shell. Let's go into a little bit more depth on some of the advanced things that you can go through. So what we saw leading up to this point is really the bulk of what we're going to be doing within the Gogo shell. Now, if you want to get a little bit more fancy, this is where this section is going to come into place. Because the Gogo shell not only allows us to kind of see what's going on within the Gogo shell, we have full access to the OSGi container that allows us to do a lot of different things. We can call services and create scripts to do some nifty things if we wanted to. So here's one example here in which we can utilize the Gogo shell to iterate through and get a list of all of the different users that are within our Liferay instance. Again, you could do this through the UI of Liferay, but if you just have access to the Gogo shell and wanted to write something really quick, you could, just highlighting the power of the Gogo shell. We mentioned this in the previous section when we were talking about the Liferay workspace, but you can also access the Gogo shell using blade CLI, blade sh followed by the specific Gogo shell command. So if I wanted to list all of the bundles within my Liferay instance, blade sh followed by lb. Again, if you want to go even fancier, right, you can have the results of your Gogo shell command be piped to your shell console itself, right? So as you can see here, this is a bash script that finds all of the bundles that have the string blogs within it. One thing you can also do within the Gogo shell is you can create your own Gogo shell commands. So this is done by creating a component and then deploying that component within the module to the OSGi container. And so in this example here, within the component property, you have the OSGi command function, portal statistics, that's going to be the command name itself, and then the scope is the namespace. One thing to keep in mind here is that whatever that OSGi command function is, it's going to call a Java function or a Java method. So just keep that in mind. So after seeing all of that, you can see how we have a lot of different functionality, a lot of different things that we can do with the Gogo shell. You can stay very basic, just taking a peek and doing some basic diagnostics, or you can be very advanced, creating scripts, running services, and so on. So with everything that we saw with the Gogo shell, we can also use another tool known as the Felix Web Console. Now the Felix Web Console functions very much like the Gogo shell. The only difference with it is that you have a full web console. You have a UI to work with. So rather than typing everything out within the Gogo shell itself, you can use this web console to do so. It is a bundle in and of itself that you're able to download, and it's extendable as well. So if you really want kind of a full feature console to be able to debug all of your OSGi bundles, you are able to extend the Felix Web Console. So with all those things in mind, let's take a look at some of the key concepts that we discussed. So a Gogo shell command, or our Gogo shell commands, are divided into namespaces. What you'll find is when you type help, you might have a couple of commands that are actually the same. One of them, for example, is list. The namespace helps us differentiate which list command are we using. All component and service objects in the OSGi runtime are available and accessible in the Gogo shell. So this is what makes the Gogo shell so powerful, is that we have access to all of those components, all of those services, all of those OSGi bundles. To create your own Gogo shell command, you have to first create an OSGi command component, implement it properly, and then deploy it to the OSGi container. The Gogo shell can be configured from your portal ext.properties so that you can telnet into whichever port that you want. By default, 11311 is typically what is deemed as standard. So that wraps it up for this video, and I will see you in the next video.